This is a CBS News special report. Bob Schieffer in New York with an update on the election of the Pope. Good day. We have some smoke rising again from the Sistine Chapel. At this point, we do not know for sure what color it is, whether it's white, meaning a Pope has been elected, or black, meaning they are not there yet. We are not hearing any bells at this point. The audio signal, we have been told that the cardinals will use when they have chosen the Pope. They'll ring some bells so we won't make any mistakes on what color we have, what color the smoke is coming out of the little smokestack. Now, our CBS News correspondent John Roberts is in Rome. John, what color does it appear to be?
Well, Bob, I'm just sort of coordinating here the color of the smoke along with the timing. It would seem to me as though they've only been able to take one vote this afternoon, and typically they do not burn the ballots until after two ballots if there has not been an election of a pope. The smoke has been going now for some 30 seconds, and typically by this time it would have turned black. I don't want to make any assumptions, but at this point the smoke does appear to be white. And there would not be reason for smoke to be coming out of that chimney if it was not a successful election for the Pope until about an hour and 10 minutes from now. Father Paul Robichaud has been standing by with me all afternoon. And Father, what's your take on what we're seeing coming out of the chimney of the Sistine Chapel?
Well, again, I couldn't agree more with you. This seems to have been only one ballot, and we shouldn't see smoke unless it's white, and it appears to be white smoke, although we're not hearing any bells. This is an extraordinary situation because it suggests that after four ballots, we have a pope, and that means that someone very quickly gained a great deal of momentum in the election for the new pope, and looks as though we have the pope.
Now, Vatican Radio apparently is saying that it's black smoke, but the smoke has not changed color. Though, as Father Paul Robichaud just said, we have not heard the bells of St. Peter's ringing. We can hear from our vantage point up here waves of applause coming up from St. Peter's Square. Now, in a bit of a change, during one of their general congregations this year, and there are the bells. Are those bells? I thought I heard a bell ring there. During one of their general congregations, the cardinal said that in addition to the smoke signal, just to be sure that the indication of the papal election was clear, that they would ring the bells from St. Peter's. It's quite a windy day here in Rome, and so the sound is sort of drifting back and forth. So, you know, sometimes you hear a sound and then it drifts away, but so far there does not appear to be any bells. Mark Phillips is above St. Peter's Square, a convent location. He says he does not hear any bells, but there are waves and waves of applause that are coming up from the square. Mark, what are you hearing from your standpoint?
Well, I'm hearing a lot of people cheering on the square. People almost, it seems, not quite ready to believe that this could be a white smoke, a papal election indication, but it is looking more and more that way. One of the questions that's never been answered here was how would the people who ring the bells know what the selection was, or that there had been a selection, presumably without any communication other than the smoke coming out of the Sistine Chapel. Then the bell man would have to wait until he was confirmed that that was white smoke as well. We don't know the nature of the internal communications within the Basilica behind me here and within Vatican City behind me here. But as you can see now, there are more and more people on the square here who are expecting those bells to ring any moment. And judging from the kind of smoke that we've seen in the two previous emissions yesterday evening and today, that smoke had turned a very dark color by now. This emission has not turned a very dark color, and a lot of people here are becoming increasingly convinced that we have a new pope in the making here. They're gazing up and still waiting for bells to ring, but I have to tell you, we have not heard any yet, and I imagine that the people in charge of the bells are going through the same confusion that we are now.
This is Bob Schieffer back in New York. And gentlemen, I must say, just the irony of what we are seeing here in this age of communication in which we all live, in this time when we can flash news around the world by the speed of light, and yet we're all sitting here trying, you're there, we're here, trying to figure out if we're seeing white smoke or black smoke coming out of this little smokestack there in the Vatican, and trying to hear, are those bells ringing? Are they not ringing? Because the wind is blowing a certain way. It's just an amazing sight, an amazing event we are watching here, and it, I think, reminds us all of how ancient this whole office of the Pope is. They've been doing it this way for over 1,000 years, and we're still depending on a very ancient form of communication, smoke signals, to determine what has happened here. John?
Well, Bob, I was remarking yesterday that that's not the only irony here in the Eternal City this week. For all of the spectacular sights that there are here in Rome, the Trevi Fountain, the Spanish Steps, the old Roman Colosseum, and the ancient city, we have been transfixed with this piece of steel atop the Sistine Chapel. People down in the square by the thousands have brought out binoculars to stare at this for hours on end, and it really is quite ironic when you think that amid the beauty of Rome, this lone steel pipe is the thing that everybody has been watching and that has really stolen the show. And Bob, I would have to say that I don't want to make a real leap of faith here, but based on the timing and based on the fact that that smoke has not turned dark, it would seem that on the fourth ballot of this conclave, they may have indeed come to a conclusion. And Father Paul Robichaud, correct me if I'm wrong, but that smoke definitively looks white today.
It looks very white, and what we saw on the first ballot last night was it initially looked white, but it turned black very, very quickly. The smoke is not turning black.
Let's go down
to... The smoke
is
not turning black, John, definitely.
John, let's go down to Alan Pizzi now. Alan is down amongst all those people, and the pictures we are seeing here, there are a lot of smiling faces down there, Alan.
Bob, the people here certainly think they've got a pope. They're streaming up the Via della Conciliazione, which is the main road that runs into the square. As the smoke came out and word of the smoke came, people began to run out of St. Peter's Basilica into the square. People are looking up at the chimney and at the giant screens. But it's interesting that we've not heard the bells, and we certainly would, because there are 6 bells in St. Peter's. The biggest one weighs 9 tons. In total, they weigh nearly 14 tons. They're 200 years old, some of them. They would be heard. What we don't know is how they get the signal from inside the Sistine Chapel to whoever rings the bells. Now, they did promise the bells would go. There have been mistakes made in the past. They have gotten the color of the smoke wrong. But this time, as you say, it certainly looks white, and I would say that the tens of thousands of people here in the square and the thousands, hundreds, thousands more that are running past me heading towards the square, they certainly think it's white smoke. But we're not going to have absolute confirmation until we hear those bells, and there will be no mistaking, because once they start to ring, the bells all across the city are supposed to join them, and this is a city full of churches and bells, so I would think that when the bells go, we'll know for sure. But everybody here seems absolutely convinced, Bob, that smoke is white. There's been a sea of flags out there. There's a lot of nationalism going on here. I've seen Brazilian, Portuguese, Argentinian, German, French, Spanish, Italian. Everybody who's got, every country just about that's got a candidate who's papably, that's someone who could be a pope. They've got representatives here waving their flags, and I guess, you know, they're all, as you say, those smiling faces, they're all hoping it's one of theirs, but a lot of people are just glad that there's a pope. The whole mood here changed palpably from the funeral over the last few days, especially. It's become almost festive, and now I think it's approaching the rapturous, I would say, and as soon as they ring the bells and make some kind of an announcement, we're going to know. Now, the
Alan,
time between the actual announcement, yes?
Alan, let me interrupt you just for a minute to remind people we're approaching the time when they normally ring the bells. So just as a normal part of the schedule. So there may be some confusion here. Let's go over now to Mark Phillips and get his take on all of this. Mark, where exactly are you?
Well, I'm just on a rooftop overlooking both the smokestack, which we're staring at, of course, with increasing interest in these huge crowds that are forming up in the square. I'm pausing here because I thought I heard a bell tolling, but I will tell you that we're just coming up to 6 o'clock Rome time, so there will be the natural tolling of the bells on the hour here to further add to the confusion of exactly what's going on. that may well be taken by the people in the square. I think we can count on it, judging from the mood that we've seen developing, that will be confirmation that a pope has been selected. But I'm not sure that those bells are the bells that were intended to be rung at the time of the actual election of a pope. There was always, we've been talking about the irony, but this is...
We need to have a camera
communication age, instant age. We've been talking about just how ironic a situation this is, but it's also a very theatrical and dramatic one. And part of it is the tension that this whole scenario creates. The smoke comes out, you immediately don't know which color it is, then it settles into black or white, black previously, apparently white this time, but we're still waiting for the confirmation of that. But even if it is, even if the bells do now go and we can conclude that a pope has been elected, there is now another period when the newly elected pope will be fitted with his robes, will choose a name, will have dedications to him from the other cardinals who elected him, and a good hour or so at least until he appears before the square and we know who he is. So this may be just one more act in a drama that's being played out here, and we could be sitting here talking and wondering who it is. Bells are going, but that could be 6 o'clock or it could be a new pope. You can pick it either way at this point. We're just going to have to wait and see and try not to make any huge mistake as to just what's going on here, Bob.
Okay, and so I take it these are the bells that would normally ring at 6 o'clock Rome time. That may be what we're hearing now. Is that right, Mark?
Well, yes, that may be what we're hearing now. This would be the time the 6 o'clock bells go. I'm just going to turn and look. The big bell, there's a big bell on the upper left-hand corner of the Vatican as you look at it, at the facade of St. Peter's as you look at it, and presumably it would be the one.
Father Robichaud says those aren't the 6 o'clock
ceremonial
bell.
All right, Mark, let me go up to John Roberts right now.
Maybe they're not.
Mark, let me go up to John Roberts right now. He's kind of our bell expert. What are you making of this,
I think
John?
he's right.
Well, Father.
Yeah, that's not the 6 o'clock bells.
What I'm hearing from Father Robichaud, we just lost our picture there. Father Robichaud says he does not believe this is the 6 o'clock bell. Let me bring in.
Tell them that.
Let me bring in Father Bob Wister, who's here with us in New York. Father, what do you think is going on here?
I think what's going on here is confusion. The smoke came 10 minutes before 6 Rome time. Some bell is going to go off in Rome on the 6 o'clock hour. And now everyone has to try to discern whether or not there has been an election. It seems that there very probably has been an election just from the timing. The cardinals don't seem to have had enough time to do two ballots this afternoon.
Explain what you mean by that and why we're putting some significance in the smoke coming at exactly this time.
The cardinals when they enter into the conclave for their afternoon or morning session, will take 2 ballots. And if after the first ballot they have not elected a pope, they simply move to the second ballot and don't burn the ballots until after that second ballot. But should the ballots be burned after the first ballot of the afternoon, that would indicate that they have an election. Otherwise, they'd be waiting till later after their second tally is taken.
Let's get back to Mark Phillips. Mark?
Well, we're still trying to figure out here whether the bells that we're hearing, and we are hearing bells, are the ones that indicate an election of the new pope. The normal 6 o'clock bells here are kind of classic chimes, a big gong, 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 6 of them. I'm pausing to listen again. I thought I heard just that. That didn't appear to be what we heard as these bells went off, but we're surrounded here. This is Rome, and there's a church steeple and a cupola with bells in it just about everywhere you look, and the sound of bells carries over this town depending which way the wind is blowing. But there we go. I think we've now got it. I think we can say that is the main ceremonial bell in the Vatican. I think we can say at this point we have a new pope. Now the issue is, who is he and what does he represent? I'm here with Father Mike Russo of St. Mary's College in California, and I guess, Father, Russo, this is the point of time where we start just speculating as to what a vote. This would have been 3 ballots, one last night, 2 more today, this morning, so this would have been the 4th ballot that this next pope would have been elected on. Can we draw any conclusions?
I don't think we can. I must say that even confusion is traditional here. I remember back in '78, the only indication that the Pope John Paul I had been elected was actually the opening of the window. That was the cue to the people in the crowd. Otherwise, this is probably the best system we have with the bells, now that we know that the bells have rung.
Well, if drama is the intention here, then it certainly has had exactly that effect, cheering people and ringing bells, Bob.
Well, if what has happened is what we think has happened, in a short time then we expect the senior cardinal deacon, Jorge Medina Estevez, to announce to the people in St. Peter's Square the name of the new pope. He will shout a phrase in Latin. Father Wister, what will that be?
He will shout the phrase, Habemus papam, we have a pope. And then, as part of the Latin formula that follows, reveal the name of the pope as cardinal and the name he is taking as Holy Father.
And how long would you expect it would be between the ringing of the bells before we see this next step, the announcement that we have a pope?
I would expect about 45 minutes, because part of the ceremonial, after the newly elected pope has accepted, each of the cardinals process to him to offer him their allegiance and obedience. And of course, before that, he has to be garbed in the white cassock. He enters off to the left of the altar, what is called the Room of Tears, where they have 3 cassocks waiting, small, medium, and large, and hopefully one of them will fit him pretty well. It hasn't always worked in the past. Some have had cassocks pinned up in the back because they were so small, and Pope John the 23rd apparently had a bit of trouble getting into the largest one.
All right, well, let's go back to John Roberts now. That must be quite a sight you're seeing, John.
Oh, Bob, and the waves of cheers and applause just keep on rolling up to our position here, which is about 3 city blocks away from St. Peter's Square. Just an amazing scene. We haven't seen this bell ring since the Pope's funeral. It was a fairly short time that it took to elect a new Pope. I mean, it's not unprecedented. The shortest papal election of the past century was 2 days and 3 ballots. That was in 1939 for Pius XII. The election for John Paul I was 2 days and 4 ballots, which is the same amount of time as this one was. The question now on everybody's mind is who exactly has been elected. The favorite going in was Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, the Dean of the College of Cardinals, the man who is the head of the doctrine of the faith. He really is the Roman Catholic Church watchdog. It's not known whether or not he possibly could have prevailed, or whether or not another candidate who was challenging him perhaps might have gained some momentum over the course of the last 3 ballots and gotten up to that 2/3 majority. But what we definitely know is that 77 of the 115 cardinals who were locked in that conclave have voted for a candidate. Father Paul Robichaud, I want to ask you, I got to ask you, what's your best guess for what happened?
Well, it's pure speculation, but because we don't know, because everything was so secret. But what we do know, based on past experiences, is that someone very early on gained a great deal of momentum and won on the 4th ballot.
There was no consensus candidate going into this. It was thought that Ratzinger may have had 50, perhaps 55 votes at maximum, and no one was talking about any other candidate having near that number of votes. How is it possible that without a consensus candidate going into this conclave, they could have come up with one who, while isn't a consensus candidate, had a 2/3 majority?
This is really an amazing historic moment, and we, again, until we know who the new Pope is, we won't really be able to speculate very clearly. But what seems fairly evident is that very early on, the Cardinals made a decision, and momentum was with one of them, and he's the new Pope.
Let's go back to Bob in New York right now.
All right, just so we can go down to Richard Roth, who is down among that huge throng. That must be quite a scene for you, Richard.
It is a scene, Bob. It is a scene, Bob. happened since the ringing of the bells. It was preceded, of course, by the intense dispute in the high school music. But once those bells were ringing, if you have to make a guess now, who do you think it would be?
Well, I think we're not going to be able to get to Richard right now. He may not, because of all the noise down there, he may not be able to even hear us. Alan Pizzi's also down there. Alan, can you hear us?
I can hear you, Bob. I think the problem with Richard is that he's absolutely surrounded by a surging sea of people. They're running from every direction. It's like a rock concert, a giant party's going on. And now we can finally absolutely clearly hear the bells. You can maybe see them in the shot up in that top left-hand corner of St. Peter. They're swinging the full length of their swing. That also they're up on the giant screens, and surely everybody in Rome, certainly, even if they're not watching television, must know now that there is a new pope. The interesting thing now will be, of course, who is he? As you say, it could be half an hour to an hour before we know. Interestingly, the official Vatican newspaper, Osservatore Romano, has prepared 60 different front page leads. They've got 60 candidates profiled, and they say they'll hit the streets with a special edition, a very limited number of pages, but a special edition within an hour or so of the Pope being announced. But they're going to be sitting there wondering which button to push, which one to roll on. And that's what everybody here, of course, wants to know. He will appear on that balcony that's draped with the purplish, reddish, burgundy kind of curtains, and all eyes are going to be focused. Everywhere you look, there are people taking pictures and people on cell phones. This has got to be the most widely reported event that I've ever seen. There are cameras in amongst the crowd. The platform I'm on's got about 40 or 50 cameras. All along the colonnade on the left-hand side is lined with cameras. And as I say, that whatever we're reporting is being reported 10 times as much, I think, by the number of people down there taking pictures and using their cell phones. The crowd just keeps growing. This piazza will hold 250 to 300,000 people. Now, there's not that many yet, but I would venture to say that soon there will be, because they're streaming their way in. People were here already, of course, maybe 20, 30,000 through the afternoon, but now it's absolutely filling up. It's every race, color, size, and description you can imagine. People on bicycles. The streets all around here are going to be closed to traffic as quickly as the police can manage it, because they're assuming it's going to be just like it was for the funeral, Bob.
All right. Thank you very much, Alan. We're going to continue to look at these astonishing pictures there in St. Peter's Square. But as we do, we want to bring in Monsignor Brian Firm, who is the Dean of Canon Law at Catholic University and held the same post in the Vatican. Father, you spent many years in the Vatican. What's going on inside now while these crowds continue to swell outside in St. Peter's Square?
Well, I imagine there's an equal amount of excitement amongst the cardinals having just elected a new pope. Theoretically, according to the Constitution, once the pope has been elected and then goes into the room of tears and places on his papal clothes, the cardinals are supposed to give him homage and obeisance. And theoretically, that is what is probably happening now. But I must admit, what is a bit difficult to determine is whether there were one or two ballots this afternoon or this evening in Rome, and that I'd be very interested to know later on, whether in fact the new pope was elected on what would have been the fourth ballot or on the fifth ballot, because when the smoke came out, it was a bit difficult to tell whether it was the smoke of one ballot or two ballots this afternoon.
Why is that significant in your view? Because it really didn't take them very long this time, did it?
No, it's not actually significant in one sense whether it was on the first or second ballot this afternoon. I think it's probably significant simply because, as someone else I think has suggested earlier, someone went into the conclave probably with very strong number of votes, and that they not only held up but actually increased to the 2/3 majority, so that a very short conclave, as it were, in 5 or 4 or 5 ballots is an indication that the cardinals are fairly united and were fairly clear on the person they wanted who was fairly clear to them when they entered the conclave.
How do they, as we know, the cardinals do not campaign for themselves, but as I understand it, they do have advocates. What's been going on for the past couple of days, not just in the chapel where they take these votes, but when they gather for dinner at night? Do they actually make little campaign speeches for the people they're for, or how do you do this? How do you advance your cause?
Well, I think a great deal of thought was actually given to various possible candidates before they actually entered into the residence on Sunday, and that a great deal of thought was given to residents mainly because the cardinals were thinking of the type of person they wanted as Pope who would meet the various challenges of the Church. Actually, in the residence, there wouldn't have been campaign speeches in the sense we might think of here in America, but there certainly would have been discussions amongst various cardinals as to how, what the Church needed and who was the person most suited to lead the Church. So it would be a much more informal type of discussion, but certainly genuine discussions.
But in reality, they do sort of lay out platforms, do they not?
I think, yes, you're absolutely correct. They lay out platforms rather indirectly, in the sense, well, let's put it this way. I suspect the sermon of Cardinal Ratzinger on Monday, yesterday, at the Mass for the election of the Pope, was in a certain sense not so much a laying out of a platform as an American political person might do, but a suggestion is, these are the problems I see in the Church, and in a sense, if you elect me, this is a problem, or these are the problems I see, and this is how I intend or would like to confront them. So it's a rather indirect fashion.
If you had to make a guess right now, would you guess that Ratzinger might be the one that was selected, because we understand that he had a considerable block of votes, as it were, when this all began?
Well, I'm not very good at making guesses, and I'm going to wait a half hour to make it. But
very good,
certainly
Monsignor.
Cardinal Ratzinger would be there.
Very good, Monsignor. Let's go back to Mark
Thank
Phillips.
you.
Mark?
Well, we're not going to guess either here, Bob, tempting though it is. And of course, guessing's been the name of the game here even up until this vote, and we'll continue or so. I'm here with Father Mike Russo as well. And we're just sitting here talking about what the significance is, A, of the fact that this was a relatively quick conclave. We think probably that there was one. There could have been two votes this afternoon, but given when the smoke emerged, it was probably just one vote. We're waiting for the new Pope to step out onto the central loggia balcony in the main facade of St. Peter's Basilica. And it's not just a question of the man who steps out there, it's a question of what he'll represent in terms of what the Church sees as its main mission and its main challenges. Of course, Bob was mentioning Cardinal Ratzinger and what have you. If it's him, what do you think the cardinals will have concluded as to what approach they ought to have in what they're facing?
Well, I think Cardinal Ratzinger, of course, yesterday kind of gave his indication at the Mass of his worldview. And obviously, if he is the candidate, if he is the person who walks out as Pope, they will have affirmed that. It's interesting, I think there's been a period of discernment among the cardinals, both at the residence here at the Vatican and
discernment, you mean discussion?
Discussion,
they've been talking about this sort of
sure
thing.
They have. And so, again, no one could predict who's going to walk out on that balcony, but we have to wait that half hour.
Well, we do, but when we see who it is, we'll be able to draw conclusions
sure.
about what the Church wants to do. We all know, and everybody's been talking since the death of John Paul II, as to what a hard act he is to follow.
Sure.
The question being whether they would try to follow with another charismatic leader, even if they had one who could match him, or somebody who perhaps cast less of a shadow but was more collegial and more cooperative with the other bishops and what have you. When we first see the man who will be Pope at that point is Pope step out on that balcony, will we be able to draw conclusions as to where this Church is going?
I think we can. I mean, I think we're going to be saying that this individual will have a vision for where he wants to bring the Church in the next few years, the next decade. It'll be very interesting in the next few moments as this thing transpires.
Because there were some pretty dramatic choices
among these
candidates. Interestingly, this was probably the most homogeneous, if you think of it in terms of who appointed them, conclave, certainly in recent Vatican history, because of this Pope. And we'll go back to Bob now, but the man who comes out of there will mean a great deal, not just to Catholics, but to people right around the world.
Absolutely.
Bob.
Well, we just saw, Mark, we just saw someone sort of peeking out, it appeared, parting that curtain just a little bit, as if, this were in a theater and someone was behind the curtain and looking to see how many people were out there in the seats. In this case, of course, they're all in St. Peter's Square. I want to go back now to John Roberts. John, all of these cardinals take a vow of silence, but as we know now, eventually we begin to find out what has happened. I wonder how long it will be, and I wonder what Father Robichaud would say. How long do you think it'll be before we'll get some details about how this vote went and who voted for who and what was the deciding factor?
Well, Bob, we'll probably never know really who voted for who in terms of how many ballots each cardinal, each candidate got on each individual ballot. That's something that could either come out within a matter of days or something that we may not know about for years. And a lot of that will be at the discretion of the next pope. Now, John Paul II was a pretty media savvy and pretty media friendly pope. The next pope may carry on in that tradition and may indeed release the results of the balloting over the next days or weeks, or perhaps it's a cardinal who believes that it's better if the world does not know what the particular factions were within the conclave and doesn't tell us. There have been in the past some cardinals who have taken notes and breaking their vow of secrecy, because the only person who can allow a cardinal to talk about what the results of the elections were is the Pope himself. So breaking their vow of secrecy, they've actually published these in memoirs, and that has sometimes been decades later. I would expect, though, given the fact that this Vatican has been uncharacteristically open about everything from the Pope's health over the recent months to the way that they conducted the funeral and televised it around the world, to the fact that they allowed cameras inside the Sistine Chapel just as the conclave was beginning, that we'll probably learn something in the next few days about how the balloting went. Now, in terms of how many ballots were taken today to elect the Pope and whether it was on the first ballot this afternoon or the second ballot, we're just sitting here thinking about the timing. And let's not forget that after the ballots have been taken, the scrutineers have gone through them, counted them, written down the names, announced the names to the cardinals, and found out that one of them did garner 77 votes for that two-thirds supermajority. Then there are a couple of things that need to take place. The elected Pope has to be approached and asked if he wants the job and then what name he will take. So that could have accounted for the delay in the appearance of the white smoke. We pretty much thought that we were just about at the end of the window for white smoke coming from a first ballot. But if you count in some of those pro forma ceremonies that need to take place, that could have accounted for the delay. Now, in terms of names that the Pope could have possibly chosen, let's bring in Father Paul Robichaud. And Father Robichaud, by the name that the new Pope, which is the 264th successor to St. Peter, the 265th Pope, by the Vatican's count, has taken, it may give us an indication of what the papacy may be like.
Oh, I think that's very true. And I think that, for example, if we learn that the new Pope is John Paul III, for example, that will be a sign that the new Pope intends to continue the traditional approach of John Paul II. If the new Pope takes a different name, particularly a dramatically new name, that will be a statement unto itself. If the new Pope chooses John the 24th, that will be a whole turn again in terms of visionary, kind of a visionary approach to the church. So the name will tell us something about the Pope. And again, I think also when we discover which cardinal it is, that will also say something about what we can expect from the new Pope as well.
Now, it is possible that the cardinal could choose his own name, correct?
Yes. For example, we've never, if it's Cardinal Ratzinger, we've never had a Pope Joseph, a Papa Giuseppe Primo. So we don't know, but that's very possible.
So we're looking at the balcony here and the window and the doorway. It's actually a pair of French doors that has been framed by this sort of reddish purple set of velvet curtains. We're expecting the senior cardinal deacon Jorge Esteves to come out of there probably any minute now, and he will announce to the world that we have a pope. He announces it in Latin, does he not?
He announces it in Latin, and he says, "I announce to you, annuncio vobis, with great joy, we have a pope, and his name is the most eminent and reverend Cardinal of the Roman Catholic Church. And so that will tell us something, and then we'll learn his name.
Now, we'll have to listen very closely as well, because the Christian name will be announced in Latin, will it not?
The Christian name, his first name, will be announced in Latin, yes.
So if it is Joseph Ratzinger, we would be listening for...
That's a good question.
John, I don't mean to test your Latin skills here, but yes, go ahead, Bob.
I would like to ask the Father, why do popes take a new name?
Well, the reason popes take a new name is in the 4th century, until the 4th century, popes just took their own Christian name. But in the 4th century, there was a pope called Mercurio, or Mercury, which was the name of a Roman god. And instead of taking a pagan name to be the pope, he chose the name John and became Pope John II. And that began the tradition of the pope choosing a specific name for himself.
And it's my understanding that sometimes that in the past they have taken the name of the pope who named them as a cardinal, but I suppose in this case, since nearly all of them were named by Pope John Paul, do you think actually that there is a chance that the next pope will take the name John Paul and be the third, or would he not want to be compared to this pope who has, attained such a place in church history?
That dynamic is very, very interesting. If you remember, when Cardinal Luciani was elected Pope, he took the name John Paul I as a way of saying that he represented and accepted the Vatican Council of Pope John and Pope Paul. Then he died some 34 days later, and suddenly we got a new Pope who, continuing that tradition, took John Paul II. Now we'll see if we have a new name. And again, you're right, the tradition was in the 18th and 19th centuries, the Pope took the name of the Pope who had named them a cardinal. But again, we'll have to wait and see. This is going to be very exciting. We may be waiting a little bit of time, though, because we have to remember that in the Sistine Chapel, each of the cardinals is coming forward to pledge obedience. The Te Deum is being sung. There's a prayer service of thanksgiving. So it may take a little bit of time before those doors open on the balcony of the facade of St. Peter's.
And Bob, we should point out to you that we're seeing a little bit of movement behind those French doors. The curtains moving just a little bit. I mean, it could be the circulation of air, or it could be people preparing to open those curtains and open the French doors. But the reason why you're hearing so much cheering coming out of St. Peter's Square is because that image that you see right now on the television screen is being beamed to people throughout the square on these big screen television sets. And they have been out there for hours waiting for the smoke. Now they're waiting for the arrival of the senior cardinal deacon and eventually the arrival of the new pope. And any little piece of movement that they see there behind that curtain sends these waves of applause and cheers just rolling up from St. Peter's Square.
All right, let's go down to Alan Pizzi, who can give us a little more on that. He's a little closer to them. Alan?
Bob, it just keeps filling up. Now the people are, the entire square is absolutely jammed. The road in front of it is jammed. The traffic is all stopped, and the Via della Conciliazione is beginning to fill. The people, as John mentioned, every time there's any kind of movement, waves of cheers roll through them. I think they'll cheer just about anything at this stage, and this is just the beginning. You have to wonder how they're going to hear the name of the Pope. Certainly the Vatican has this whole area wired with huge speakers. They can broadcast whole church services out here, but the noise this crowd is making, they're going to need some very big speakers to tell them, although I expect there will be, people will calm down. It's interesting that this has happened now because, of course, presenting the Pope is only the first stage of several events that have to take place. One of which is his kind of inauguration. They don't have the huge coronation that they used to have where he would be paraded around St. Peter's Square in a giant chair. That's been done away with a couple of popes ago. But nonetheless, he still has to have the official inauguration ceremony and a mass and so on. Now, Archbishop Marini, who's the master of papal liturgical ceremonies, will be in charge of that. And he has already said that he needs at least 4 days to prepare for it. And they like to do it on a Sunday. So it could well happen by this weekend. The Pope, the new Pope, whoever he is, will also have to go to San Giovanni Lateran, which is his official church in Rome, to conduct a service. So there are quite a few things that have to be done. But right now, of course, what we're waiting for is for someone to step through those curtains and then we'll know who he is. The crowd here is absolutely festive. I haven't seen anything quite like this, and I've seen a lot of crowds in this square. It's as crowded now, I would say, as it was, almost as crowded as it was for Mother Teresa's beatification. That was probably the biggest event we've had here in the last several years. So it's just going to get more and more and more full. The street's now full. Most of these people are going to have to look at those 4 giant screens to see anything, because, of course, when the Pope does appear in his white robes, he will be a very small figure up on that little balcony. But thankfully the weather has held. It looked like rain, not that I think that would deter the crowds here either, but it's the sun is breaking through here, Bob, as it sets, and the crowd is just keeps growing.
Well, it's an absolutely spectacular picture, Alan, and I must say we are not the only ones who are surprised that this is going so quickly. Vatican Radio just a minute ago moved a story that said it's been only 24 hours, surprising how fast he was elected. Now that's the Vatican Radio, the Vatican's official radio, commenting. They too were surprised that it has gone so quickly. Let's go back now to John Roberts. John?
And Bob, as we wait for the senior cardinal deacon to come out, we should point out that while it's only noon there in New York where you are, it's 6:30 here. The Roman workday is ending, and people are just streaming out of their places of work and into St. Peter's Square and up the Via della Conciliazione there to await the announcement of the new pope. As we watch the square fill up, and as we watch that pair of French doors there on the balcony on the facade of St. Peter's, you might be wondering exactly what's going on inside. Well, we've prepared this animation to help you along. The stove inside the Sistine Chapel is an old-fashioned announcing system. When the cardinals agree on the new pope, the ballots are burned so that white smoke comes out of the chimney for all to see. What's going on inside the Sistine Chapel? The newly elected pontiff dons his papal vestments in a robing room called the Room of Tears, called that because of the tears of emotion shared by so many of the newly elected popes. When he emerges, he is seated at a throne near the altar where cardinals each pay homage to the new pontiff. Now, inside that Room of Tears, there are 3 sets of papal vestments, all prepared by the Gammarelli family, who have been preparing the papal vestments for decades. They've been made in 3 sizes, small, medium, and large, and now what they're probably doing is they're just making the final adjustments on those vestments so that the Pope appears here at the balcony above St. Peter's Square, looking somewhat like the clothes fit him. Of course, very soon after the papal election, he'll be fitted up for a set of clothes that fits him properly. Father Paul Robichaud, as we await the arrival of the senior cardinal deacon, and as we await the appearance of the 264th successor to St. Peter, what type of pope do you think cardinals were looking for as they went into this conclave?
Well, I think several things. I think, first of all, they were looking for a man of prayer. I've heard more cardinals earlier on, before they took a vow of secrecy, say that they're looking for someone who has a deep sense of personal prayer, who is a spiritual person. They're looking for a pastor. They're looking for someone who, because so many of the cardinals are bishops of the major cities of the world, their concern is to have someone who really pastorally cares about their people. They're looking for a communicator. John Paul II has really raised the bar on that. Someone who has a personality, someone who may have language skills, someone who can really use the media, maybe not as powerfully as John Paul II did, because he really made the media a part and a pulpit out of which he preached to the world. I think they're looking for someone who will have some concerns about Islam, for example. Islam is a real issue that the Christian Church and the Catholic Church as a part of Christianity faces. They're going to be looking for a person who can re-evangelize Europe. They're going to be concerned about someone. So there are so many issues, for example, in the third world, for example, the unequal distribution of the world's goods is a whole issue. So I think, again, a lot will be told to us when we actually see who the new pope is.
We can just sort of hear the strains of the Italian state musical band. It's gearing up. Apparently, they're clearing the way down there in the square. The band will come in and play a tribute to the Pope. As you can imagine, the way that the streets are filling up, it's going to be a little bit difficult for them to get in. It's also interesting to note that yesterday, one of our producers had been out on the streets and run into a member of this band who said it's not going to be a pope tonight. This is speaking of the first ballot last night, because they haven't called us to play yet. So obviously the band has gotten the call, and they're here to play, and they'll be playing for the new pope in just a few minutes. Bob?
Let's go down now to Richard Roth. I think we've established communications with him. He is down in the middle of that mass of thousands upon thousands of people. Richard, can you hear us?
I can, Bob. You know, it seems like just a few minutes ago I was almost alone down here. And now, with almost every movement in the crowd, it's like the most enormous version imaginable of Whisper Down the Lane. A sound will come from over there, and people will think it's an announcement, and waves of excitement will move through the crowd before people realize, well, it hasn't really happened yet. They're all waiting, of course, for a fluttering of the curtains on the loggia of the benedictions, the balcony over St. Peter's Square, but that hasn't happened. What's happened in the meantime, for example, is we've been visited by a large group of school children who've been moving slowly through the square, and finally we're able to come over this barricade in front of me to have a ringside seat for when the announcement is made. Nobody here, of course, knows who it will be. Everybody is speculating. Let me see if I can find someone who has an opinion. You, come to me. Who, you were wondering when all this began what color the smoke was.
Yeah, at the beginning, we was like uncertain because we thought that it was like gray and...
And now you're wondering who the Pope is.
Yeah, of course.
And who do you think?
I don't know. I hope an Italian, of course.
And I imagine the people up there holding the Italian flag hope the same thing, don't they?
Yeah, I think so.
There are all sorts of different groups of people from countries, different countries in the square. You see all sorts of flags. Does everyone, you think, want a pope that comes from their own country?
I think so, but I think, above all that, this pope is great, like, the past one, so...
You liked him?
I hope so, yeah, I liked him so much, and I think that everybody loved him so much, so I hope that this pope will be great, as the last one.
You're going to wait till there's an announcement, aren't you?
Yeah, I think so, yeah,
as long as it takes?
I don't know. It should be like, I don't know.
I bet you will wait, Bob, and I bet most of the others here will also be waiting, despite the fact that it does seem to be raining just a bit. Bob?
Okay, thank you very much, Richard. Father Bob Wister of Seton Hall, a professor of church history, is with me in New York. Father, do you recall other times like this, and how does what we're seeing here? For one thing, we're getting a lot better view. I mean, the church has really gotten into the communications age here. They've been very open throughout all this period. How does this one compare to the previous ones?
I was in Rome for the election of Pope John Paul II, incidentally working for CBS, and the crowds were nowhere near the size of these crowds. They were enthusiastic. Roman crowds always are enthusiastic, and then when you inject into them a lot of college students abroad and tourists, the level of enthusiasm just bursts through. But the funeral of Pope John Paul II, and as well as this moment, make the other conclaves and elections pale in comparison. As you mentioned, Bob, this is an era of much more sophisticated communications, and as John mentioned earlier, the Vatican has been so much more forthcoming with information. 26 years ago, it was like squeezing to get the slightest drop of information, even about the ceremonial as it was coming forward.
Well, as we watched that vast gathering of people for the funeral, we finally came to the conclusion that it was probably the largest spontaneous gathering of human beings in the history of the world, which is a fairly astonishing thing when you stop and think about it.
Well, that's appropriate for the funeral of the man who has been seen by more human beings than anyone in the history of the world through his travels. I don't know if anyone has even attempted to calculate the number of people who have seen him, even just as a little dot or speck in the distance, when they're at the back of a crowd of perhaps 3 million in Manila attending Mass.
We were talking a minute ago about popes choosing a new name. Do you think that the next pope will choose the name John Paul, or will he not want to be compared to John Paul?
It's probably the toughest papal act to follow in history, and my own guess would be he would hesitate, because the comparison would always be there, and it's a rough image to stand up against. There are a wide range of names. Could be any name he wants, not just one taken before.
This has been a fascinating event to watch. Let's go back to the very beginning, where we saw that puff of smoke in the beginning. There was a great deal of confusion. Kind of walk us through it, Father. What's been going on since then, and what's going to happen now?
Well, the cardinals counted their votes, and an announcement was made to them that a certain cardinal had received the supermajority of 77 or more votes. He was then asked, will you accept election as Supreme Pontiff? Apparently, he said, I accept. At that moment, he is Pope. He is then taken to the Room of Tears that we saw in the animation, and there he removes his scarlet cassock and dons one of the three prepared cassocks that fits him the best. He then emerges again, and it looks as if it's about to happen here.
All right, here we go. Look, here it is. He will say, Habemus papam.
Habemus papam.
Papam, which is, we have a pope.
This is Cardinal Medina, the senior cardinal deacon, who will make the announcement.
Fratelli e sorelle carissimi, queridísimos hermanos y hermanas, bien chers frères et sœurs,
my dearest brothers and sisters,
liebe Brüder und Schwestern, dear brothers and sisters, annuncio vobis
I
gaudium
announce
magnum.
with the greatest of joy
Habemus papam.
we have a pope.
Eminentissimum
Our
ac
most eminent
reverentissimum Dominum,
and most reverent
Dominum Josephum,
Joseph,
Sancte Romane Ecclesiae Cardinalem Ratzinger,
holy, most holy Cardinal of the Roman Church, Ratzinger.
So it is Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger. This is the German cardinal.
qui sibi nomen imposuit Benedicti XVI.
He takes the name of Benedict XVI. He is, of course, the cardinal that many thought was the favorite going in. By some surveys, he had about 50 votes of other cardinals as this process began. He needed 77, which is 2/3. He's 78 years old. He's born in Germany. He possesses a steely intellect, we're told, and is ready to dissect theological works for their dogmatic purity. Would it be fair, Father Wister, to say he's a hardliner?
He is definitely someone who takes the church doctrine very seriously and expects it to be followed in the most minute detail by all.
And here he comes.
They're now dropping the great tapestry, which contains the coat of arms of the late Pope John Paul II. And this tapestry is placed on this balcony only when the Holy Father enters this comes out on this balcony to give his papal blessing. So you will see the papal crown and keys, but it will be the coat of arms of the previous pope. It looks like they're having a little trouble draping it there. Usually they have quite a bit of time on a feast day such as Easter when the Holy Father would appear, and they have it sideways now, but eventually they'll get it straight.
And then, Father, once they get this done, then we'll see the new Pope?
Then Pope Benedict XVI will appear vested in the papal robes, a white cassock and a red cape, which is called a mozzetta, and he will be preceded probably by a processional cross. And perhaps he will say a few words. We don't know, but we know that he will give a blessing to the crowd.
Let's go to Mark Phillips. Mark?
Well, Bob, this was, as you mentioned before, the predicted favorite going into this race. All that speculation, which we poo-pooed in the run-up to this vote, it turns out was pretty right. The thinking was he had a block of votes, and the question was whether he would stick it out until that block overcame the 77 vote hurdle. It appears that he has. And he really represents continuity in this choice and continuity in the church. He was, as everybody knows, the kind of moral policeman of the Vatican under John Paul II. He was the prefect for the doctrine of the faith. He has a reputation, probably the best known and the most respected and even perhaps most feared of the cardinals under Pope John Paul. And of course, he had led all the congregations in the 9 days of mourning leading up to the beginning of the conclave, and made some pretty strong statements over the course of that, including the one at the Mass leading into the conclave directly, in which he talked about the moral drift the church had undergone, and what was needed was a really staunch and traditional approach. He talked about, in his words, the dictatorship of relativism, and these, I think, are the sorts of phrases that we'll be hearing from now Pope Benedict XVI. I guess we'll all have to get used to saying that. Father Mike Russo is with me again here. And of all of the people who are coming into this job, he's probably the one that everybody knows best. And this is a papacy we can almost predict, unless it changes from this stage on.
Well, of course, a new pope can bring his personality. Many people have said that there's a softer side to Cardinal Ratzinger. Interestingly enough, none of his students, Scola, Schönbrunn, received this position. I mean, he was able to capture it himself.
People speak very highly of him and talk about him being a very good listener. And now the rest of the world will listen to what he has to say.
And here he comes.
Here he comes. Here he comes, Mark.
A happy man.
Cari fratelli e sorelle,
Dear brothers and sisters,
dopo il grande Papa Giovanni Paolo II,
after the great Pope, John Paul II,
i signori cardinali hanno
our
eletto me,
lords, the
un semplice,
cardinals,
umile
elected
lavoratore
me
nella vigna del Signore.
simply and humbly to labor in the vineyard of the Lord.
Mi consola il fatto che il Signore sa lavorare e agire
By the fact
anche con strumenti insufficienti
that
e soprattutto
even though
mi
I have
affido alle
insufficient
vostre
instruments to
preghiere.
do this, my dear brother cardinals will be with me and praying with me.
Nella gioia del Signore risorto,
In the joy
fiduciosi
of the
del suo
resurrected
aiuto
Lord,
permanente, andiamo avanti.
who gives us his permanent
Il Signore ci
help
aiuterà.
in moving
E Maria,
forward,
sua Santissima Madre,
and to his most
sta alla
holy
nostra
Mother,
est
Mary,
parte. Grazie.
thank you.
So the first words from the new Pope, Benedict XVI. John Roberts, what is the significance of the name Benedict? Why was that chosen? Do you know?
Well, we would have to probably hear from Pope Benedict XVI, the former Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, as why he chose that name. But Father Robichaud here, as we just wait in this pause for Benedict XVI to start up, points out an interesting irony between Benedict XV and Benedict XVI.
Well, the last Pope Benedict was the Pope of the First World War, and he was a liberal, very much a liberal progressive Pope. Cardinal Ratzinger is considered a traditionalist. I should say Pope Benedict is considered a traditionalist. So we may have a real distinction. It'll be very curious to hear from the new Pope why he chose this specific name, Benedict.
Just as we wait for Benedict XVI again to address the crowd, what's the significance of them?
John, if I could interrupt, we're
here.
about to have the blessing here.
Procediamo alla benedizione.
Let us proceed to pray.
Sancti Apostoli Petrus et Paulus, de quorum potestate et auctoritate confidimus, ipse intercedant pro nobis ad Dominum. Amen. Precibus et meritis Beate Mariae semper Virginis, Beate Michaelis Arcangeli, Beate Johannes Baptiste, et Sanctorum Apostolorum Petri et Pauli, et omnium sanctorum, miseriatur vestri omnipotens Deus, et emissis omnibus peccatis vestris, perducat vos Iesus Christus ad vitam aeternam. Amen. Indulgentiam, absolutionem et remissionem omnium peccatorum vestrorum, spatium vere et fructuose penitentiae, cor semper penitens, et emendationem vitae, gratiam et consolationem Sancti Spiritus, et finalem perseverantiam in bonis operibus, tribuat vobis omnipotens et misericors Dominus. Et benedictio Dei omnipotentis, Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti, descendat super vos et maneat semper.
So, Father Wister, what did we just hear?
Father Benedict XVI call upon the Lord, the Blessed Virgin, and all of the saints to send their blessings upon the people. And then he concluded it with the formal papal blessing. May the blessing of Almighty God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit descend upon you and remain with you forever.
What will happen next?
I don't know whether or not the Holy Father will make any further remarks. Usually at this point, the Pope just stands a few moments and then goes back inside to greet the cardinals who are now released from conclave. We could see some of them standing at other windows of the Basilica watching, and so perhaps he'll go back and join them for dinner in the Casa Santa Marta over there.
Someone who knows the new Pope very well, Father, is Monsignor Brian Firm, who is at Catholic University, the Dean of the Canon Law Department there. He was in the Vatican for many years. Tell us about this man, Monsignor.
Well, I'm pleased and astounded at how quickly he was elected in 3 or 4 or 5 ballots. His background tells a lot about him. He's an intellectual and academic. He was a professor at Tübingen and various other universities in Germany. And then he was called to Rome by the Pope John Paul II as prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, where he's been for the last 20 years. And I've got to know him quite a bit through that, mainly because I'm a consultor of that particular congregation and was there just a month ago at a meeting, and in fact received rather strangely a letter from him from Cardinal Ratzinger, then now the Pope, just last week. He also does not correspond often to the press representation of him. That is, occasionally the press has been rather savage in describing his character. He is in fact an extraordinarily mild-mannered, very humble person, and very engaging and open to listening to people. He has very clear ideas on the future of the Church, I think, and certainly very clear doctrinal ideas, which is to be understood from his position over the last 20 years as prefect of the Doctrine of the Faith, which is the congregation mainly concerned and responsible for authentic doctrine in the Church. But he's a great academic. Yeah.
What do you think will he liberalize Catholic rules? Will he tighten them up? What do you think in the beginning here? What do you think, what course will he follow?
Oh, I think he will maintain very much the course of his predecessor, Pope John Paul II. I think one of his great attributes, and I think one of the things you might see from Pope Benedict XVI, as it were now, is his ability to speak, because he's an academic and well-trained theologically, his ability to speak and have some impact, especially on the situation of the Church in Western Europe, that is, in the loss of faith of Western Europe. I think he will be able to speak to the secular world in a particular way, and that will be a positive attribute of his pontificate.
Thank you very much, Monsignor. We want to go down to the square now. Let's go first to Alan Pizzi, who's down there among them. Alan?
Bob, you know, one of the things that struck me was just before the new Pope stepped out on the balcony, what we had was the sun breaking through. Just as it had so many times for John Paul II, so it did for the new Pope. His welcome was quite warm. I wouldn't say rapturous, but a very warm welcome from the crowd. He would not have been the choice of many Romans, I have to say. They wanted someone, they wanted an Italian for starters. This is the easy part, though, getting the initial accolades. Now he faces a very tough job. This new Pope, Benedict XVI, inherited a church that is in some ways divided between liberal and conservative. He represents the conservative wing, but there are a lot of very pressing issues here. The church is low on finances. There's a huge problem of secularism in Europe, a shortage of priests. They have to deal with the issue of things like stem cell research, AIDS, abortion, all those kinds of issues are something he's going to have to deal with. And there are many, many people who are not going to be too pleased with Ratzinger's conservatism. I'm just going to step in front of the camera here for you so you can see that we're actually here. This is a man who was always seen in the background as a kind of a gray eminence. Some people call him the Vatican's Rottweiler. He was a very strict doctrinaire man, not known to be a particularly warm man. So he's going to have to exude a little more warmth and charisma than he has. But I think, as you can see from the reception he got from the crowd here, people are certainly willing to give him a chance, and they're certainly pleased that they've got a new pope. I think we were all taken very much by surprise at how fast it was, Bob, but here we are, a new era begins, Bob.
All right, let's go now to Richard Roth, who's also down in that throng. Richard?
Bob, I guess the thing that struck me immediately was that while he'll be known as Pope Benedict in English-speaking countries, in Italy he's Pope Benedetto, and immediately the Italians, at least in the area that I've been standing, have a chant for him, a very rhythmic chant for Pope Benedetto. There was tremendous joy here. All concerns about the nationality of the Pope seemed to just fade away immediately. One woman I talked to said that she's happy not only to have a new Pope, but she said she's happy to have a Pope who has a firm hand. So take that as you will, Bob.
All right, and now back to John Roberts, who's sort of up above all of this. John, some thoughts?
Well, Bob, the fact that the College of Cardinals now is so far flung around the world, and the fact that a lot of these gentlemen have not even had a chance really to sit down and talk with each other before this week, gives some credence to the idea that the Pope would be somebody who is best known to this College of Cardinals. And certainly Joseph Ratzinger was the person who got the most face time in the past couple of weeks here. The Dean of the College of Cardinals, he's been conducting all of the official business regarding the church for the past week or so since John Paul's funeral. He led the funeral mass for John Paul. He led the mass for the election of the Pope on Monday morning. And I've got to say, Bob, that there was a particular moment just as the Mass was over and the Cardinals were all filing out of St. Peter's Basilica. They were sort of surrounding Cardinal Ratzinger, and he was there in his full Cardinal regalia, wearing the bishop's mitre on his head, and he almost looked like a Pope in training. So certainly if you want to look at the idea of PR value having some effect on this far-flung College of Cardinals, that it would speak to the idea that Joseph Ratzinger was the one who was best known. Now there's some other symbolism here in the election of Ratzinger, 78 years old, one of the oldest members of the College of Cardinals, a member of the Roman Curia, not a pastoral cardinal, as was thought might be elected to the 264th successor of St. Peter. And let's bring in Father Paul Robichaud to talk about the significance of that. The fact that he's a member of the Curia, the fact that he's 78 years old, does this speak to the idea of a transitional papacy?
Well, very possibly. Certainly this idea that he will continue doctrinally and in terms of the discipline of the church, the present tradition of John Paul II. There's no question about that. He is a different personality, a very, very different personality. He's chosen a different name. He's not John Paul III, and he's made that very, very clear. He's chosen a name that means blessing in Latin and Italian. So in many ways, he is and is not like the last pope. But the problem with the transitional papacy is simply this, as we saw with John Paul II. This modern medicine allows an older cardinal, now pope, to live and reign and administer the church for many, many years. And in fact, I think there's a little bit of a surprise. In fact, many of the people who talked about Cardinal Ratzinger becoming pope simply said, no, he's too old. So the age of the new pope is a very significant issue here.
Well, he also appeared to show a lot of humility when he appeared before the crowd. Historically in these conclaves, the person who most likely is the one to be elected pope is the one who to the best of his ability, shows that he does not want the job. And in fact, Cardinal Ratzinger tried to retire at least a couple of times, and John Paul II would never allow him to. In his greeting to the crowd just a few minutes ago in St. Peter's Square, we have the English translation of it. He said, "I am consoled by the thought that the Lord knows how to work with inadequate tools," showing some humility there to say, I am not worthy of this job, and I'm going to trust in the Lord that he will help to guide me through these times. And some troubled times as well that the Catholic Church faces. This
is a very difficult time for the Church. There are so many issues that the new Pope faces. Certainly it appears that he will continue a papacy in the tradition and in the style and with the same approach as John Paul II.
Now, he delivered the homily at yesterday's Mass for the election of the Pope. What do you make of the tone of that homily? It seemed to me as though he was saying, you know me, you know what you're going to get, and you're going to get somebody who is very faithful to traditional church doctrine.
Well, I think Cardinal Ratzinger has for any number of years very clearly stated that his concern is to preach the truth over and against the ideologies, the movements, and the other elements of this world that pull people away from true faith and what truth is itself. So I think he felt, as he said, that John Paul II did that, and that the next pope needed to do the same. So I think what we heard in the Mass for the election of the new pope was perhaps the first statement of the new pope on his pontificate.
Now, we hear a lot about so-called cafeteria Catholics, and there are a lot of young people in this world who probably could be described with that label. It's people who take a look at the menu of the Catholic Church, and they look at column A and they say, well, I like this, and they'll look at column B and they say, well, I like this, and they say, well, but I don't like what's in column C, so I'm just going to adapt this menu for my life. He's not the sort of person, it seems, who has a whole lot of tolerance for cafeteria Catholics.
Well, I think that's exactly true, but also he's not the only cardinal in the College of Cardinals who feels the same way. A majority of the cardinals feel that way, and a majority of the cardinals, obviously, in electing Pope Benedict, feel that preaching the truth of the gospel, holding out against the various kind of movements, ideas, and ideologies of this world, the relativism, as he talked about it, is what this new papacy is very much about.
You know, his conservative bent, his strict adherence to conservative Catholic doctrine has earned him the nickname in some circles as God's Rottweiler. Now, is that fair or unfair?
Well, I think that's very unfair. I think in point of fact, this is a very humble, prayerful man. I think that he has stood up for what he believes in, and oftentimes that has come across as being kind of the enforcer of doctrine within the church. That was his job. Now he's the Pope. He's got a very, very different job. We'll see how his pontificate varies from his actions as director of or prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith.
Do you expect, given his age and given his extensive experience inside the Roman Curia as opposed to out in the diocese, that he is going to be the same type of pilgrim that John Paul II was?
Well, there have been various stories about Pope Benedict's health over the last few years, and a feeling that with the election of the new Pope, he would wish to retire back to his home in Regensburg, Germany. We'll have to see if the new Pope travels. Certainly there's a great expectation after John Paul II that his successor would be a pilgrim Pope who would travel the world. And we'll have to wait and see whether Pope Benedict does this.
Well, certainly if he does decide to travel the world, he should be able to reach out to a lot of people. He's fluent in 4 languages.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is. And again, if his first appearance on the balcony today is any example of that, he beamed broadly. The crowd in the piazza responded to him very, very warmly, and so he's off to a great beginning.
Some articles that I've read, some opinion pieces I've read in the last few days suggest that he gets a bad rap, that while he does definitely preach this conservative doctrine, that he may be the person to be able to bridge the gap that John Paul II seemed to have, and that people liked the man, but they weren't necessarily listening to the words. I heard it described very well as people seemed to like the music of John Paul II, but they didn't necessarily listen to the lyrics. But that Joseph Ratzinger had the type of personality that may be able to make that connection between the conservative doctrine and getting people to listen to what he has to say.
Well, one of the things that is oftentimes forgotten about the new Pope is that when he was the prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, he always had a history of listening. He may not agree with what you said, but he would listen very carefully to it. And so this new Pope is going to have to listen now to a whole new set of voices, and we'll see how he responds.
And certainly there is a lot for the new Pope to listen to, issues from collegiality in the Church to contraception, the ordination of women, whether or not priests may ever be able to marry. It would seem to me from the just on the surface that those are probably issues on which Benedict XVI is not going to move the Catholic Church very far forward during his papacy, but certainly issues that are going to be on his table. Bob Schieffer?
I want to bring in Father Wister of Seton Hall into this, John, into this discussion. Father, how do you think this is going to be received by American Catholics? We all know that one thing that was certain in this conclave, it was not going to be an American who was selected as the new Pope, because American Catholics have some problems with the Church that perhaps Catholics in other parts of the world don't have. Will this be a popular selection among American Catholics?
I think it will be popular among different groups of American Catholics. Those Catholics who believe very strongly in the traditional approach to the faith and the maintenance of traditional doctrine will be thrilled with Cardinal Ratzinger, who for many has been their hero. On the other hand, some of the liberal groups in the Church, say Voice of the Faithful, which emerged recently, and Call to Action, which goes back a good number of years, plus the large contingent of liberal Catholic theologians will be very concerned about this election, because they know that their opinions are not Pope Benedict's opinions.
Well, let's just kind of tick off some of the issues. For example, should priests be allowed to marry? This is not going to be a Pope that I would guess is going to move very far toward that particular thing.
This, though, Bob, is not a doctrinal matter. It's a matter of discipline, and any Pope could change this discipline.
You wouldn't expect this
I would not expect him to, even if there is pressure from various bishops around the world. However, as Father Robichaud said, once a man becomes Pope, his view is now different. Even as head of the Congregation for Doctrine of the Faith, Cardinal Ratzinger had a restricted area of activity.
Would you expect this Pope to have a different view on, say, gay marriage?
Absolutely not. That, again, is a matter of church doctrine, which his predecessors have always maintained, and he will continue to maintain.
And pedophilia, which was a problem for the American Church.
Cardinal Ratzinger would be very up to speed on that, because the management of the cases of priests who have been accused of pedophilia are sent to Rome, and they're adjudicated within his congregation when he was prefect of the doctrine of the faith. And it is an area of something that cannot be tolerated.
Let's go to Mark Phillips now, who has a little closer look at exactly who this new Pope is. Mark?
Well, Bob, this is religion, but this is also, of course, politics, and the spinning has already begun. In fact, it began even before this election of the new Pope was announced. And basically what you're hearing from supporters of the former Joseph Ratzinger, now Pope Benedict, is that he's gotten a bad rap in the press, that the reputation that he has, which is a very vast one internationally, is not deserved, that he had to be, in fact, implored by the previous Pope to take the job that he took as a papal policeman, that he didn't want to do it. It wasn't in his nature to enforce that kind of grip on the clergy, that when he did take action against dissidents within the Church, which he did several times, he did so reluctantly, and that's the kind of thing that we're thinking. But as you rightly say, we have been looking at the man. We have been, because he was, of course, one of the favorites going into this race, the man who was Joseph Ratzinger, and is now, of course, Pope Benedict XVI.
Joseph Ratzinger was probably the best known of all the cardinals in this conclave, and easily the most controversial and polarizing. As Dean of the College of Cardinals, he officiated at the funeral mass for John Paul II, cementing his position as a front runner with his pope-like demeanor and impressing many with his touching homily to his old boss.
He handled the funeral mass very well, and he's big enough for the job. He knows what needs to be done. He can do it. He's highly intelligent. He knows what can be altered, what can't be altered. He's very much in charge.
Joseph Ratzinger's job under John Paul II as head of the Vatican's Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, the Old Inquisition, cast him in the role as chief of the Vatican's theological thought police. And it's a role he assumed with relish, banishing liberal dissent from the Church's mainstream, sometimes banishing it altogether. His reputation is one of being highly respected, but feared.
He has the most appalling reputation around the world as someone who has squashed theology, persecuted theologians, the chief of the thought police, the master of the Inquisition.
But his reputation within the College of Cardinals is as the custodian of the work begun by John Paul II. He represents continuity, and given the affection shown for the last pope, continuing his approach in the form of a Ratzinger papacy has obvious appeal to the princes of the Church. Ratzinger's supporters say the image which produced the nickname God's Rottweiler is misplaced.
He himself is absolutely not the iron-fisted enforcer, arch-conservative that he's depicted as being.
Many saw this contest as a final showdown between progressive and regressive forces within the Church. Between those who think its doctrinaire approach to issues like contraception and the role of women has driven the otherwise faithful in the West away, and those who think sticking to traditional teachings is the required response to modern secularism. The election of the conservatives' champion, Joseph Ratzinger, is conclusive proof as to which side has won.
If the chief heresy hunter of the Church becomes Pope, well, then that by itself means regression. And while he is a good man, I would not want to deny that, he doesn't have anything like Pope John Paul's charisma.
Being Pope, though, provides an aura of its own, and Joseph Ratzinger, to the surprise of some and the satisfaction of many others, is now Pope.
And I think you can guess by some of the comments in that the election now of Joseph Ratzinger as Pope Benedict XVI will not stop all of the discussion. In fact, of course, the papers across the world will be filled with comment tomorrow as to what kind of a man he is and what kind of papacy we will be experiencing under him. And also, it's interesting, we've made a lot of discussion today about this being an election within the instant media age. This is a huge TV event around the world, and you can bet that there are reporters crawling all over Bavaria starting right now to find out things perhaps that we didn't know about this man. He may be the best known pope in the shortest time that we've ever seen.
One thing we know, that there's one person who's very happy today about all of this, and that is the London Bookmaker. Father Wister, tell us about that.
Well, I suppose as a historian, one of the footnotes of this election is it's the first election in which there was online betting, and they got it. The odds were in favor of Joseph Ratzinger, and the odds on a name were in favor of Benedict. I'm just wondering now, when I get back to Seton Hall, who won the seminary pool.
All right. Let's go down to Alan Pizzi now, who's in St. Peter's Square. Alan?
Bob, the crowds are starting to disperse, but it's going very slowly. This is like a giant street party that's slowly dissipating. There will be many in this crowd who will be a little bit disappointed that they got someone like Cardinal Ratzinger to become Benedict XVI. At the same time, I think there's a feeling of relief that it's over. Quite frankly, people here felt a little bit lost in the interregnum period. People here, even if they're not religious, they do want to have a pope. They want that kind of continuity. Now, what kind of a pope they got, that remains to be seen, but they're more than willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. They like the idea of having the man in white back up there. They want him back up in the window come Wednesday, come Sunday. They want that blessing. Interestingly, the atmosphere here changed over the last couple of days to one of anticipation. They had raised the papal flags back up from half-mast to full-mast. They were down, obviously, for the morning of John Paul the 23rd. Back up they went. John Paul II's window, where he used to bless the crowds, was left open. I guess in a sort of homage to him, and also in anticipation that it would soon be filled. And we will see Benedict XVI there in the next couple of days. One of the things about having a pope, as far as the Romans are concerned, is it makes them feel like they are kind of the center of the world, even if he's not Italian. And as I say, there's a kind of it'll be a festive feeling for the next little while. And I think they're also going to be glad that the streets are going to be cleared and they can get back to business as usual. What I'm wondering, though, is if we're going to see masses of German tourists like we saw Polish tourists, that'll be the next stage to see just how popular it is, I guess, Bob.
Okay, Alan. I want to go back to Monsignor Alan Firm, who's in Washington. He is the Dean of Canon Law at Catholic University, held the same post at the Vatican. Your final thoughts, Father, on the selection of Cardinal Ratzinger to be the new Pope?
I think it's actually a very positive sign. I know there's a great deal of debate, discussion, and perhaps even disappointment amongst a number of people. But from my own personal knowledge of him and having worked with him, he's a very, very humble person. And I have any number of examples and anecdotes of that. And he's also in the classic line of those academics who are always prepared to listen to the other side and to try and understand the argument of the other side. And I think he will have a very positive impact, especially on the Church in Western Europe. I also think, just to add that, I think he will adopt an approach to the whole question of the Catholic Church's relationship with Islam that is based on practicality and is also based on the real situation of the growth of Islam, both in Western Europe and also in other parts of the world. He's very understanding and wants dialogue with Islam, but is also believes it's very important, fundamental, that the Church maintains and tries to strengthen its own particular mission in the world.
Thank you very much, Father. I want to go back now to John Roberts, who, of course, has been our lead correspondent through the funeral for Pope John Paul, and now through this exciting, and I think there's no other word for it, as you watch this spectacle unfold today, this event that we saw, this election of the new Pope. John?
Well, Bob, as we said yesterday, as they began the procession into the Sistine Chapel, is both a solemn and a celebratory and exciting event. It really has been a sort of a carnival-like atmosphere down there in St. Peter's Square over the last 24 hours, with people coming out to watch look at the Sistine Chapel roof and the pipe that was on it that would carry the smoke, as well as look at the big screens. They were down there with their binoculars. People who were on vacation here in Italy just wanted to come down and be a part of it. I talked to one young woman today who said, "I'm going back home tomorrow and I would really like to be here for the smoke, so I hope they do it tonight." And there was just a certain kind of sense of electricity in the air there that told you that, well, just maybe something was going to happen. And this was an election that defied conventional wisdom on a number of different fronts. All of the Vatican watchers and all of the members of the Roman Catholic clergy that I had talked to were saying, well, probably 3 or 4 days, maybe Wednesday evening, maybe Thursday morning. Certainly, with no consensus candidate, it looks like this is going to take a long time. But here we had an election that was over, a conclave that was wrapped up within 24 hours. People were saying, well, Joseph Ratzinger may have 50 votes, but he'll never get to the 77 that he needs. There's just too much opposition against his papacy. There were too many other candidates out there who were deserving. People were saying, well, maybe it's time to go to Latin America, or maybe it's time to go to the Third World for a pope. And then they chose somebody who is a well-known member of the Roman Curia. And as well, there were people who were saying, well, perhaps the pope should be somewhere between the ages of maybe 62 and 68. And here they chose a pope who was 78 years old. So from a number of different standpoints, Bob, people just got this one totally wrong. As Father Wister was saying, the only people who got it right were the bookmakers in Ireland, who had him at 3-to-1 odds. And the odds changed just before going into the conclave and dropped him to, I think it was 9-2 and then 11-2 after that, but also got that name Benedict right. Well, let's bring in Father Robichaud just one more time before we go here. And John Paul II ended the 455-year lock that Italians had on the papacy with the fact that Joseph Ratzinger has now been elevated to become Pope Benedict XVI. Does this mean it's all over for the Italians?
It's since I'm here in Italy, I'll say it's never over for the Italians. But I do think that we have seen
good approach when you have to live here.
It's true, but I think that what we have seen is another European pope, which we kind of expected in some ways, either European or Latin American. I think that what this represents is the fact that John Paul II made the papacy not an Italian institution, but a global pulpit in which to speak to the world, and we now have another global pope.
So even while it may send a certain signal that they chose a member of the Roman Curia to take over as pope, the fact that it's a non-Italian still keeps that global perspective about the church?
A non-Italian who is competent in a number of languages, yes.
Well, Bob, Joseph Ratzinger, now Benedict XVI, you can see an outpouring of emotion there on the screen, as well as celebration here in St. Peter's Square, and they'll be looking forward to his first Sunday Mass here in St. Peter's. Bob?
Well, as you say, John, it defied all the conventional wisdom. It came more quickly than any of us suspected that it would. But as they say, the smart money, that's where it was. The smart money was on Cardinal Ratzinger. He was the favorite among the London bookmakers. He was the favorite in online betting. And oddly enough, the name Benedict was also the name that most people who were wagering on all of this thought that the new pope would be named. It's quite a day, wasn't it, Father?
Absolutely fascinating. It came faster than anyone expected, and the candidate was someone who initially was put forward, and then all of the wise voices came out and said, no, it won't be him, it can't be him, and it turned out that together with the London bookmakers and the online bettors, the College of Cardinals had the same idea.
All right, thank you so much, Father. And thanks to all of you, literally in Rome, here in New York, and Washington, who've been a part of this broadcast today. We want to close now with a little recap of some of the sights and sounds that we saw on this remarkable day, a remarkable day for all of us as the new Pope was chosen.
Habemus papam.
We have a pope.
So the cardinals of the Roman Catholic Church have acted, and they acted quickly to elect a new pope. On the second day of the conclave, they chose 78-year-old German Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, the oldest person to become pope. He's the dean of the College of Cardinals. He has taken the name Benedict XVI. We're going to have more about the new pope in this historic day on your local news on this CBS station, and of course, we'll have a full wrap-up from our team in Rome on tonight's CBS Evening News. Till then, this is Bob Schieffer in New York saying thanks to all of you who are part of this broadcast. Good day.